Chairman Mao en route to Anyuan was originally a painting and then became a series of prints to celebrate the communist ruler and just an amazing piece of propaganda art that we're going to connect to the Russian peace, the 5-year plan that we had looked at, and other portraits too of great power. So Mao was the Chinese Communist revolutionary leader and basically founding the People's Republic of China, leading China from the middle of the 1900s, so 1949 to 1976. So this painting, the original painting, was done during a time called the Cultural Revolution, when portraits of Chairman Mao really are everywhere, first of all, and they show him as the leader who is very much in support of workers, the common people. He is one of the people, and his goal with this whole Cultural Revolution was to get rid of any remaining kind of remnants of capitalism, to reinforce communist principles, and in a way to kind of get out of the reminders of the 1950s famine, failed attempt that he had to transform China into an industrial society that just all happened way too quickly. So there was a lot of things in the 50s that went on that were difficult. And so Mao wants to kind of remove himself from that a bit. So this was painted in 1969. So we're about almost 20 years from that, well, 15 to 20 years from that time period of famine and just kind of suffering in China. So what the artist does here is not show him in a modern setting, but kind of go back to something that he was involved with in the 20s. And in 1922, Mao organized a strike of miners and railroad workers against working conditions and so on, and to really highlight the suffering of people and that he's on their side and he's one of them and he's the only guy who can solve those problems. And a lot of those workers were on Mao's side. They enlisted in the Red Army, which was the communist army, agreeing to follow Mao basically to the ends of the earth. So this image is really kind of a reminder of that. He's in a very young man in this image versus at the time period that the painting was actually painted in the 1960s. He's, I think, in fact, in his 60s. So this was done about 50 years after that mining strike in Anyuan. And so let's talk. I mean, this is definitely propaganda art. And it was the type of art in China during the 1960s called social realism, really focused on peasants, workers. It's a lot like the movement in Russia that we looked at with the 5-year plan piece that we did in class. So it's very much in the kind of same ideas as that era, and a lot of propaganda art during this time. So if you look at Mao, he is young, so idealized. If you look at his left hand, it's clenched in a fist, so very determined. He's got a serious expression on his face. He's looking out beyond, into the future where he's going to lead China into the modernization of, into the modern world. Most paintings, though, done during the social realism time was showing him in traditional, like Western wear, something like this. And they used a lot of warm colors. Here he is leading a group of workers. They all look happy. And again, he's wearing more Western clothing. So you go to this piece, he's got the traditional Chinese gown on, cooler colors. And so one is like, the traditions, cooler colors meant more serious, more determined. There's less kind of jovial attitude that you'd see here. And it's one of, getting to business, getting things done, being that, really valuing China and what it stands for. And not only all that, but you put him on top of this mountain. Because if you look behind him, the mountains are dwarfed by him. And he is on top of this great mountain. So it comes across as he's like a god. And atmospheric perspective, for sure. I mean, it's a really nice, kind of a realistic looking landscape. Even though it kind of comes across very traditional, you can still see modernization kind of symbol. There's a dam in there on the left of Mao, but there's also a telephone pole that I'm pointing out. So you can see this is not a China from the past, even though he's kind of hearkening back to those ideals. He's still going to lead China to the modern world. So, yeah, to get this idea across, as we've talked about before, paintings are limited because there's just one, and to make more, it takes a long time. So, what they did is make prints, a lithographic print of this, and they reproduced this image over 900 million times. And that's not a typo, it's not a mistake. That amount, and you plaster it everywhere. Everyone can see this, and you just can't avoid it. This image of Mao as the one solution, the godlike figure to lead the people to a better life, to lead China into the modern world, to provide for everybody. I mean, it's just an overwhelming propaganda piece. So I would say for, function, absolutely propaganda. Using this original oil painting by Lu Chunhua, uh, and then making prints of it, it's propaganda. And then for formal qualities, I'd say proportion or scale, because he's bigger than the landscape. He's bigger than the mountains that surround him. So that just gives him that godlike quality, um, to him, and therefore expresses his power and abilities. So that again is Chairman Mao en route to Anyuan, that mining strike that he led when he was very young. But applying that event and those ideals and young, very kind of uh, powerful Mao, applying that to the modern era in the 1960s, there when life was difficult and some things had gone wrong, and he is now presenting himself as the one solution to those problems. So again, this is the Chinese piece, Chairman Mao en route to Anyuan, and done in the late 1960s.